moments ago, we actually had the conversation in regard to the different paths that we use as we work with individuals, what are called the four paths. I recognize also as a coach, consultant, and someone who has been trained in a number of areas that we use other items as well. When it comes to coaching, of course, the whole aspect, there are a number of different formats that one can use to coach individuals. There are the different things that I've been trained to do. There's what is called the GROW method of coaching, and that has to do with the aspect of working with an individual, and you sit down, you speak with them, and then you talk about their goals. What are their goals? What do they intend to actually do, or what is their intent as far as coaching? Why have they come to the coaching arrangement? And what you're doing in that particular situation is that you let them identify where they're going. And for us, what we do is that we actually go through a process where we ask individuals to write out their goals. And we prefer that they write out their short-term and their long-term goals. So they have a entire statement where they are writing out, so to speak, what is your goals for the next 3 months? What are your goals for the next year? What are your goals for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, and longer? What are your goals? Where are you going? And when we work with that, there's a whole process that's involved with what we call looking at your future or possible futures that we work with. And that, when you look at it as far as this long term, it's called, first of all, knowing who you are. That's important. The statement of being or identity comes into play. Who you are, your statement of identity. And that makes it possible for you to be in alignment with who you are, is in line with where you're going. So you are moving from the point of where you are today, if you want to consider that to be the seed form of who you are. And then where you're going forward, or where you are today, is the seed form of who you are. Where you're going is the fruit of where you are, of who you are. It is the fruit of who you are. So where you are today, or if you want to look back in the past at your beginning, from before you were formed in the womb, all of those kinds of things, that's the seed. But the ultimate, becoming your authentic self, that's the fruit of your beginnings. That's who you are developing into. And there is concordance, or there is this whole aspect of alignment. And what we call in the 8 A's, which is what we have, there is alignment or concordance, congruency in that entire process that we work with individuals in regard to that. And so it's very, very important that an individual be congruent with his or herself. And we work with the individual in regard to that. So we go through that process. So at that point, that's what I mean when we say we talk with the individual about his or her goals. And when a person has gone through a process in which there has been some type of trauma in their life, whether it's great loss, whether it is great gain, it doesn't really matter, but it is some type of trauma that they've had, some story that they're repeating over and over again, because trauma, what takes place in regard to an individual is that they repeat the same story over and over again. It's like what I say to individuals is when a person who has gone through trauma, it's like there used to be golf balls that were made of rubber, compressed rubber. It's like rubber strings that were wrapped. And those golf balls, once you hit them, those strings were meshed together. They were just collapsed into each other. And it was very hard to unwind those strings without just tearing them all apart, because they were just fused together. So they didn't come apart individually. They came apart all together. And so you couldn't really find the separation between one string and another, one rubber band and another. And when a person has been traumatized, what has happened is it is almost, if you want to understand it like this, the nerve ending, the synapses, the experiences, the memories of their lives are really just crushed together. And it's very difficult for them to separate what is real and what is unreal, what is good and what is bad. And as a result of that, they have to go through an entire process where they are able to separate and look at what is it that they want to define as their life. Because sometimes you have a situation where the person who's traumatized, the traumatizer of them, that person may have been somebody close to them, someone who should have loved them, someone who should have protected them, but that's the very person who hurt them. And as a result of that, it's fused together in a particular kind of way. And so we have to address that. And coaching is different from therapy. Coaching is different from therapy. In coaching, what you have to have is a goal. That's why we say, where are you going? And it's not therapy. But as a person goes through the process of reaching that particular goal, that individual actually goes through a process of what one would call healing in order to actually reach that goal. So you get well as you go on. And that entire process is very, very important. And I say that in regard to individuals who are coming out of the military. There are so many things that are involved with that. And there's the possibility of PTSD, or what I call lack of coherence, all of those kinds of things when individuals are in the military is possible. And I say this from the standpoint of experience myself. That was one of the reasons I did the study myself, went through a whole process. The world can seem upside down. It can just seem traumatic, that the entire experience sometimes, and especially when people have been in places where there have been violence, all kinds of things in regard to that. But can be a lack of coherence, just transitioning out of the military. The military world can be different, very different from the civilian world. And so in some kind of way, you got to put those things back together, got to put the world that you are now going to occupy back together so that it makes sense. And so there has to be structure so that, again, what takes place is that you understand that there are steps along the way and that you go through and you complete an A. And you know that once you get to that A, there's another A. And once you complete that A, there's another A. There's structure. That's what I'm saying in regard to that. And so we walk people through that whole process, and each A is leading you closer to your ultimate goal. So the first G in the GROW model, GROW, goals are involved. And so we still use the 8 A's, but we have the GROW, GR. And then the R is resistance. Well, what is it that you're working with that's actually resisting you moving forward in regard to where you're going? What is resisting you from taking that step? And sometimes there are difficulties, there are challenges that you're working with in regard to where you're going and what you have in mind that you want to accomplish. What are the resistance? And you look at that, you examine that, you consider what is involved with your getting there. Again, so you examine that to look at it. And then the O, GRO, you look at the aspect of what are the options and what are the obstacles. What are the options and what are the obstacles? That's what the O is there. And then the W is a way forward. And so we work with that in regard to individuals. Remember, we have the 8 A's, we have the GROW model as well. But an individual, again, has to be clear. It has to be absolutely clear on the aspect that they know where they are committed to get to. That's vital. They know where they're committed to get to. Now, Northern Lights, again, listen to this a little bit more. Listen to this as it plays, please. themselves as already having accomplished their goal. Already having accomplished their goal. That's vital. See themselves. A few years ago, there is a individual, Stephen Covey was his name, wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But he's not the only one that wrote about that. There was a book called Think and Grow Rich, which has the same idea. There are a number of books. The Psycho-Cybernetics was another book written by a man named Maxwell Maltz. All of these books have the same thing in that same idea. It is actually the idea that's used when an individual builds a house and hires an architect to draw the house. They draw a picture or a diagram of a finished product. It's not the product of the building that is going to be built in stages. It is an entirely finished, complete house or a building. You begin with the end in mind. You begin and you focus and you keep your attention settled on the completed product. The same is true whether you're building say you're cooking a cake. You have in mind that you're going to cook a cake. You see the cake finish, or the individual sees the cake finish, as opposed to I gotta put the flour together, the eggs, or whatever it is that goes in there, the milk, and all of those kinds of things. That's the process that you go through, and you got to be careful and make sure that you put all of those ingredients in there. If you're the person that's cooking the cake, that's very, very important. But the clarity has to be sure that you got the clarity as to that you are completing the cake, and that has to be in the mind of the person who is the person cooking the cake. That this is what this cake is going to be. This is what it's going to taste like. And you bring in all these senses. This is what it's going to smell like. This is what it's going to be decorated like. All of those things come into play. And the same thing applies when you're working with an individual, or even if you're working with yourself. You bring in all the senses and see in your imagination, with every one of your senses clicking for you, the end results of the finished product. And what is the finished product? The finished product is yourself, you being happy, you being thrilled, you being joyful, you being satisfied. If you're talking about an income, and that income that you want to have, the lifestyle that you want to have, you see all of that. If you say if you want a promotion, you see yourself being promoted, being congratulated, the income that comes along with that. You may want to take a vacation. You may want to get a house. You may want whatever it may be that you're involved with. You see all of that. We teach people to get vision boards and put up some symbols that indicate the achievement of that particular goal, and then walk them through that entire process. And one of the reasons for having a coach, such as someone like myself, is that that individual needs to actually have someone that asks and encourages and then actually holds them accountable. That's one of the A's as well. Holds them accountable for being faithful to their process. Being faithful to their process. Because sometimes people will start, it is said that people start reading a book, read 3 pages in a book that they could have paid hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars for, read 3 pages, put the book down. Nope, that's not the way to get it. That's just not the way to get it. And sometimes, by now, 2022, people go to colleges and pay for their education. They pay for it, or their parents pay for it. It's clear about all that. But if you want to be someone who knows things and understands things and becomes an expert in what you're doing, then you learn to do it. And there's this whole thing about when you start doing it that you may not be the best at it, but you stay at it and you learn over time. Even if you fail when you start, you still do it over and over and over again, and you get better at it as you do it. You get better as you do it. So you don't become an expert in whatever it is that you're doing, even living. You don't become an expert instantaneously. It takes time. And so even when it comes to podcasting, the same kind of thing takes place here. I want to get better and better and better. And one of the ways that you can help me do that is you can email. You can tell me what are the questions that I'm not even thinking about that concerns you. Consider the idea that I'm talking directly to you. And there's something that you want to ask. There's something that you want to say. I may be leaving something out. I'm sure that I am. But you email me, admin@realcoach.com, real, R-E-L -coach.com. And email me and say, I'd like for you to talk about this. I'd like for you to say this. And if you are reading, if we're talking about Neville Goddard in his particular, there's a 5-lesson series that he does. Those lessons, if you've seen them online, heard me speak of them online, those lessons are consciousness is the only reality. That's one of them. We've done the presentations on those. The other one is assumption hardens into fact. And that really just deals with consciousness is the only reality. It sounds like, he's talking really, really, really spiritual. But what he's basically saying is what Jesus the Christ said. It says, it is done unto you as you believe. It is done unto you as you believe. It is done unto you as you believe. And the more that you believe, it is done unto you as you believe. It is the same thing as I just said earlier. You start with the end in mind. And then the second lesson is this whole aspect of assumption hardens into fact. That is a matter of persistence. Persistence. And you persist in prayer. Once you say you believe something, you don't come the next day and say it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You give up. No athlete does that. You've seen athletes and on the field, they practice. You've seen athletes, they come out and they may go to school and they weigh 150 pounds. And then the next time you see them, they weigh 220 pounds. And these are running backs and things like that. They begin to put on weight and everything like that. That's years of practice that they do in regard to getting prepared to run the way they run. I saw a video for this fellow. His name was, I think it's Marshawn Lynch, I believe is his name. I'm not sure I got that correctly right, but I remember seeing this video. I think he was like 36 years old this year, 2022. And I saw one video that he did, and he kept saying, this might be trouble. And I was trying to understand what he was saying. And what he was saying was that it might be trouble for the other side because the way he was running. And he was doing some outstanding things as he was running and scoring touchdowns. Young man, moving. And it was amazing. But he was well built to run the way that he was running. That didn't happen overnight. That did not happen overnight. Practice. And so that's what you got to do in whatever you're doing. You have to practice. And when it comes to the aspect of what we're talking about, what I'm talking about as far as changing your life through using tools, as far as the tools that I talk about those of meditation, journaling, praying affirmatively. Those are the tools that I talk about. Primarily meditation, journaling, praying affirmatively, and then there's, of course, the study of sacred books, all of those kinds of things we talk about. And in your particular area that you're working with, you need a skill set. Whatever it is that you're doing in life, you need a skill set. And then there's the accountability to a beloved community. All of those things we encourage people to do. And then as a coach, what we do is we just make sure, eye to eye, make sure, EYE, eye to eye, make sure that you are being faithful to that which you have said. And the difference between being a 6-figure earner and a 5-figure earner at your job, it could be that, or a 7-figure earner in the years that it takes to be one or the other. It could be just like that. That's why people pay for the kind of coaching that I do. That's why they do that. And we have clear results. And when it comes to health and everything like that, The Bible says things, let the weak say that I am strong. Well, you can say, let the poor say that I'm rich, or it can say, let the sick say that I'm well. There's a clear statement in one of the writers that I read where it says, that the more you say, basically, that I'm sick, then the sicker you get. And one writer said, it is a law of nature that our thoughts and feelings are encouraged as we give them utterance. The more we talk about them, the sicker we get. And then the biblical statement says, let the weak say that I am strong. And so what you begin to say is, rather than keep on talking about the trauma situation, you begin to say something the very opposite. Not the way you feel, but the way you want to feel. And as a result of that, you change the situation. Remember that it's done unto you as you believe. And how powerful is the word? The word that you speak out of your mouth, because it's the word of God that you speak out of your mouth. How powerful is it? The text says, by the word of the Lord were the heavens created. And so that's a very powerful word that you are speaking out of your mouth. And so you're taught how to speak. And that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. So just by this, and then there are things that we can send to you and talk to you about and show you about when it comes to this. And many of them are absolutely free. But those individuals who want to go because they've made a commitment to their lives, they've made a commitment to their children's lives, or to their loved ones' lives, whatever it may be, they've made a commitment. And they look at others and they see what those others are doing in society, in the world, and they say, why not me? Why not me? I will tell you, you can search online and see the works of, what is his name? Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson has a essay that he wrote. You can search for it online, and it is called History. And in that particular essay, he says this statement, which is very powerful: there's one mind common to all individual men. Or you can say common to all individual people. Now, he wrote that years ago, like in the 1840s or something to that effect. And that particular statement, when I read it, as a matter of fact, I'll do something where I'll come back and actually do this particular item. But when I read it, it blew me away. The statement, the article, the essay that he wrote. And he says basically that once you admit it into this one mind, once you understand what he's saying, that what takes place is that anything that any person has ever thought, you may think, any feeling that any person in history has ever felt, you can feel. And he goes through an entire process where he makes this statement. And you could either say he's telling the truth or he's lying. Or you can test it and see. Pray about it and ask Spirit to move. And understand that Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, is a child of America. And then he is someone whose family was made up of ministers, early American ministers. He's trained in, I believe it is, Harvard Divinity School. He's trained as a minister. And so I paid attention to what he had written and considered it, and still to this day consider it. And so when I'm talking, that's what I'm talking from, and him and others that I've read over time, and then my own experiences from this whole thing. So when I'm talking about coaching, I'm talking about the aspect of talking with someone from the spiritual standpoint. And by the way, let me say this: I'm a member of the American Psychological Association, so I'm a member of that. And in the article, I think it's American Psychologist Today. I get that magazine, and you can probably find the article online as well. There's an article, this particular issue that I just received because I subscribe to it. There's an issue, this particular issue had an article in it that was dealing with religion and spirituality. Spirituality is different from religion in the sense that spirituality deals with the aspect of not a particular religious doctrine. It is dealing with the aspect of spirit, direct contact with spirit, as opposed to one particular designation of what spirit is. And that's my definition of it. But it's spirituality. And so this entire aspect spirituality is very, very important. And it talks about things like yoga, meditation, affirmation, all of those things I just mentioned. So I'm speaking from the standpoint not of a person who is saying to you that you need to belong to a church or anything like that. That's not my point in regard to that. What I'm talking about is spirituality. That you are a person that works with spirituality. So I'm not encouraging you to belong to any particular church or anything like that. What I'm saying to you has to do with the aspect is that there's a spiritual side of life, and that whether you call that spiritual side any name or no name whatsoever, in my estimation, there's a spiritual side of life. And that doesn't mean that you have to agree, disagree, or anything else in regard to that. You find your name. You can call it, if you like, the Force, like in Star Wars. That works for me too. I like that particular movie. I remember Obi-Wan, he had already passed, according to the story. And yet, when Luke was in that starfighter, I think it was called, you hear him say, "Trust the Force, Luke, trust the Force." Well, I go for that. That does not offend me at all. Trust the Force, Luke. The same as trust God. For me, as far as I'm concerned. But that's just me and the way that I work with it. Because there's a moment where you want to trust something because you can't figure it out. And so in some kind of way, you want to know that something bigger than you, something bigger than me is there, because I can't figure it out. And there are moments in my life where I couldn't figure it out. I was telling someone a few days ago that I had a period in my life, 1986, when I was coming out of seminary, and I'm going to end with this. I was coming out of seminary, and a fellow seminarian and myself, his name was Ronald Berry, we were both taking trips to go to the places where we would soon service pastors. He was with his wife. Her name was Lolita. I was traveling. We were both going 600 miles. He was going to Mississippi from where we were, and I was going to a place called York, Pennsylvania. We were both traveling. Same distance. We had to go in 72 hours, 600 miles one way, 600 miles the other way. And he was much younger than I was at the time. And what took place was that he went down, and then that Friday, and I went down that Friday, both driving 600 miles. He had two drivers. I had one, just myself. My children were too young to drive. And then he was coming back up. And that Sunday night, I got a call. I was in the hotel room, and the call came and said that Barry and his wife and his mother-in-law were in an accident, and that Barry's wife, Lolita, had been killed instantly, and that Barry was seriously injured. He was not dead. What took place over the course of the next few days is that a few days, I guess, is that I needed to get back and take my children home, my two sons home, to be with their mother. And then I felt I needed to get to where Barry was. He was 200 miles from where I was. As far as when I got home, I had to drive another 200 miles. So I had to drive 600 and then 200 to get to where he was. And that's what I did. And when I got to see him, I just had in mind that perhaps I could say something to God, say something to Spirit, and that maybe Barry would live. But when I saw him, he was sick. They had, opened his chest and everything like that. And, he moved, at least I thought he did. When we prayed and all that kind of stuff, I just thought that perhaps Barry, would, he would get up and he would move. He would be all right. But a few days later, Barry died. And we were graduating that weekend. And I just wondered, I just wondered, why he was dead. I wondered why he was dead. I couldn't figure it out. I still haven't figured it out. But I was alive. Barry was dead. And Spirit has never explained to me. All I know is that what I just said. So there are mysteries to me. Mysteries. And I just trust God. There are still mysteries. I just trust God still to this day. And that's why I do this work. That's why I keep going, is that I can. I'm still here. And I still trust God. I still believe that we have purpose. Barry left a deep and real impression on my life, then and now. And I'm thankful to have known him. He was a lovely human being, a beautiful human being, a handsome human being. He was my friend. And so I honor him by speaking of him to this day. And I want to be the best human being that I can be in regard to that. That's why I don't quit. That's why I keep going. So I'm going to end this. Again, there are paths of the mountain, and the mountain is about your being the best that you can be. And the grow, use, remember that goals, resistance, options, options and opportunities that you're working with. And so you're looking for the options and the obstacles and understanding, and then determining a way forward. And by consistency, the whole aspect that you keep going. You keep going. You have accountability and other things that come into play so that you keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going. And you'll find that you will, over the course of time, you will see how it is that you are able to actually carry out your goals and to achieve them. And then as you achieve, it is said that nothing succeeds like success. And you will find that you will achieve that first goal, and then you will hunger and thirst for more, and it'll feel good to you. And so step by step, step by step, step by step, you'll learn more and more about what it means to be someone who achieves success after success after success. Again, send me an email, admin@rel, R-E-L, coach, COACH.com. I'm Dr. Dennis L. Waters Sr. Blessings to you. Take care. Northern Lights again.